Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the small village of Mvezo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, at a time when his country was still under the heavy influence of colonial rule and deeply segregated racial systems. He was given the birth name Rolilila, which in the Xhosa language means pulling the branch of a tree, though in local usage it often implied troublemaker. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakani Izwe, was a local chief and councillor to the Thembu royal family, while his mother, Nosekani Fanny, was one of his father's wives from the Ihaba clan. Mandela was born into the Thembu people, a Xhosa-speaking group with deep traditions and a proud history, and from a very early age he was exposed to the customs and expectations of his community. His father's death when Mandela was only 9 years old changed the trajectory of his life. Following that loss, Mandela was sent to live with the regent of the Thembu people, Chief Jongintaba Dalandaibo, who took him into his household as a ward. This arrangement exposed Mandela to a more structured and privileged upbringing, but it also introduced him to the traditions of leadership and governance within his culture. Growing up in rural Transkei, he herded cattle, listened to stories of resistance against colonial intrusion, and absorbed the values of duty and community. Even as a child, Mandela exhibited a quiet seriousness, and while his early life was marked by modesty and rural simplicity, the seeds of his later determination were already present in the values instilled in him by his family and community elders. His schooling began in a local mission school, where a teacher gave him the name Nelson, a common practice by missionaries at the time to replace African names with English ones. Education soon became the central pursuit of Mandela's youth. After his primary education, he attended the prestigious Clark Ebery Boarding Institute and later Healdtown, a Methodist secondary school where he distinguished himself as a bright and disciplined student. It was here that Mandela began to develop an awareness of leadership and discipline, shaped by the expectations of missionary education. He went on to study at the University of Fort Hare, which was one of the very few higher education institutions available to black South Africans at the time. Fort Hare exposed Mandela to a wider intellectual environment and to other young Africans who would later play important roles in politics. However, his time there was cut short when he participated in a student protest against university policies and was expelled. Returning home, he faced pressures to accept an arranged marriage, but instead of submitting, he chose to leave the Transkei for Johannesburg. This decision marked a turning point in his life, as he entered the bustling and racially divided city that would become the arena for his political awakening. In Johannesburg, Mandela worked various jobs, from a security guard to a law clerk, while continuing his education through correspondence courses with the University of South Africa. Eventually, he enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand to study law. His years in Johannesburg exposed him to the harsh realities of racial segregation under the system that would later become known as apartheid, and he began associating with activists, intellectuals, and members of the African National Congress. It was during this period that he began to form the ideals and convictions that would define his life. His struggles were not only intellectual but also personal, as he lived in poverty during his student years and faced the constant discrimination imposed on black South Africans. Yet these difficulties only strengthened his resolve to seek change. Mandela's educational journey was as much about confronting the inequalities of the society around him as it was about his academic pursuits, and through it, he developed both the skills and the determination that would carry him into political life. Mandela's entry into politics began through his involvement with the African National Congress in the 1940s. Along with contemporaries like Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, he helped form the ANC Youth League in 1944, which sought to invigorate the organization with a more militant and activist approach. He quickly rose as a prominent figure within the movement, advocating for nonviolent resistance and mass mobilization against discriminatory laws. In the 1950s, Mandela became deeply involved in campaigns of civil disobedience against apartheid policies, working as a lawyer to defend those oppressed by unjust laws while also leading protests and demonstrations. His political activities brought him into direct conflict with the apartheid state, and he faced repeated arrests, bans, and harassment. The turning point came in the early 1960s when Mandela, disillusioned by the lack of progress through peaceful protest, helped co-found Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, which began a campaign of sabotage against government targets. In 1962, Mandela was arrested and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment during the famous Rivonia trial. He spent 27 years in prison, most of them on Robben Island, where he endured harsh conditions but remained a symbol of resistance. While incarcerated, Mandela became a figure of global attention, inspiring international campaigns for his release and symbolizing the struggle against apartheid. Despite the physical and emotional toll of imprisonment, he maintained his discipline and dignity, studying, writing, and mentoring fellow prisoners. His name became synonymous with the cause of freedom, and as global pressure mounted on South Africa, his stature only grew. When he was finally released from prison in 1990, Mandela emerged not as a broken man but as a leader prepared to guide his country through its most difficult transition. He led negotiations with the apartheid government of F.W. de Klerk, working to dismantle the system of racial segregation and move South Africa toward democracy. His ability to reconcile and seek peace, rather than revenge, set him apart as a statesman of rare vision. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, and Mandela became the country's first black president. His presidency was marked by efforts to unite a deeply divided nation, promoting reconciliation through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and addressing the vast inequalities left by centuries of colonialism and apartheid. While his administration faced enormous challenges, including poverty, unemployment, and the AIDS crisis, Mandela's moral authority and symbolic power helped steer the country away from civil war and toward a fragile but hopeful democracy. He chose to serve only one term, stepping down in 1999, a decision that further elevated his stature as a leader committed to principles rather than personal power. In his later years, Mandela became a global elder statesman, advocating for peace, human rights, and social justice across the world. His health declined in his final years, and he passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. The legacy he left behind was monumental, not only for South Africa but for humanity as a whole. Mandela came to embody the triumph of resilience over oppression, of forgiveness over bitterness, and of unity over division. His life was the story of a man born into a deeply unjust society who chose to dedicate himself to the struggle for justice, enduring hardship, imprisonment, and sacrifice, yet emerging as one of the greatest figures of the modern era. His biography remains an enduring reminder of how one individual's courage and conviction can change the course of a nation and inspire the world.